What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Legends Rise, an Elder Scrolls Online podcast, the show where we educate players new and old about the game itself, whether it's how to run dungeons, discussing combat, chatting about crafting, posing information about PvP, gabbing about guilds, babbling about builds, and so much more. I'm your very sweaty and sticky host, Marcus Axford, and with me, as always, is my co-host, the beautiful and lovely Queen of Cyrodiil herself, Lainy Kirkpatrick. How are you doing today, Lainy?
I'm doing good. Obviously hot here, dealing with the massive flies that we deal with every frickin' summer.
Yeah, we had a moth flying around, and I always name the critters after my best friend Kenny. Don't know why, it's just a hobby of mine. So, yeah, it has been, like, brutal here in the Pacific Northwest. Past couple days, it's been, like, 92, 95, something like that. And for some people, that's like, oh, well, that's not really, that hot, especially since it's, nice and breezy. Except for the fact that because of all the rain we've had this spring, middle of July, usually things start drying out, so you're not getting all that moisture, but everything is still as green as can be. And just walking on lawns and just through grass and stuff, you can feel the humidity just come up through your body, and it's just been so miserable. I've just been dripping buckets, and glad to be home in an air-conditioned house. So we also have another guest with us today from Lainy's tribe. Please welcome Kartlin. How are you doing today, Cart?
Doing good. How are you?
Well, as aforementioned, I'm sweaty and sticky, so I know a lot of
I feel like you can be more than
It's
just that, though.
105 degrees here. I have no sympathy,
oh, but is it
but
dry?
it is dry,
Okay.
so it's not bad.
So, did you want to say a little bit about yourself, or?
Yeah, I started playing ESO and at launch, or actually in beta, open beta, and yeah, I guess I'm still here. But I've been enjoying it more or less throughout the years. So yeah, it's been a good diversion, good hobby.
Do you just keep going, or do you happen to take several month-long breaks like I have a bad habit of doing?
Oh no, I generally don't take more than like a week off ever. Um, Usually if I'm traveling or something. Otherwise, never more than a few days. But yeah, I like to mix up the content I enjoy. I mainly PvP, but I do some PvE, do some housing, do some trading. Just a little bit of everything after
Oh,
outside of PvP.
housing, the real end game. I cannot wait to get to that episode. That's gonna be awesome. Alrighty, but before we have actually we're gonna be talking about healing today. Is that something you're prolific in, Cart? I'm assuming that's why Lainey has you on here.
Yeah, I actually have a pretty hefty experience in PvP at healing. A little bit less so in PvE, but I mean, I can hold my own in a vet DLC dungeon, certainly.
Excellent, excellent. So, before we get into it, we want to remind you that Legends Rise has an amazing Discord community, and wow, has it been active. In fact, we had our first little upheaval there that I was gone for. I had no service on my phone, so when I finally get service, I'm like, what just happened? I mean, we're not going to get into it on here. It's still up in the Discord. You can, go look at it. But no, it was kind of a milestone for us because it's like, oh, cool. We actually have some drama going on that we actually need to get moderators for when the us admins aren't around. So we're going to be looking into that as well. But our community handled it wonderfully. The only person who left of the whole ordeal was the person who caused the drama. So I'm really excited over that everybody was just like, okay, this was a one-off kind of thing. So wonderful, wonderful community. The Discord is becoming more and more active all the time, and I couldn't be more happy about it. So you can find the links for that Discord on our Twitter or Facebook at Legends Rise ESO. We also have an Instagram where we post pics of our adventures, and you can find that at Legends Rise ESO as well. And we're on YouTube at Legends Rise ESO channel, so if you're listening to this through our podcast, you can find the links to all of our stuff in the description, and vice versa if you're watching on YouTube, including a link for the Discord there on YouTube. We also have a Legends Rise guild network we are building called the Council of Legends. So currently we have Xbox NA and now PC EU. And our favorite Brit, Ginger. I don't know if that's. You're gonna have to because I know he listens. You're gonna have to let me know how you pronounce that. I think it's Ginger, whatever. Great time to be stumbling, but he actually was like, "So, do you guys have a guild on PC EU?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Could I make one?" So we had a little joke, and I'm like, it'd be really funny if we just had representatives for all of the platforms, and we called it the Council of Legends, and he absolutely loved it. So it's like, all right, I guess we're doing this. So there is a role in the Discord for Council of Legends, and it's all the guild masters for we're gonna slowly be collecting the platforms like Pokemon. So
Oh my god.
So, if you're looking to join either of those, come see either me or Ginger on Discord. Speaking of networking, we had something really cool happen for us today. Our podcast is now added to Bonus Roll Productions, which is like this roster of podcasts that you can give ratings and reviews for. As Ketra said, it's like Yelp for podcasting. So check us out, as well as all of our other ESO content creator friends at bonusroll.gg, and give us all the stars and reviews. And also, don't forget to rate us on Spotify and give us reviews on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. We also have a Twitch channel. Come check me out at Legends Rise ESO for Tribute Tuesdays, where I provide sort of a next day post show. This was kind of a little weird scheduling because the household, we all went to go see Thor yesterday, so we had to do a recording on Tuesday. So right after this, I'm gonna be streaming, but I try to keep streaming times between 6 and 8 because my schedule can get really weird because I can either get off early at work or I can get off late. It just, unfortunately, I don't have a set time for work, so I'm gonna be starting as soon as I can. But yeah, it's kind of a unofficial post show, as well as some Tales of Tribute. Trying to also stream on Thursdays as well, and any other chance I can get, but I really am trying to nail down Tuesday for the time being. Finally, if you love listening to us here and want more, you can go to patreon.com/legendsriseeso, and for $5, less than the price of a large coffee at Starbucks, and I'm shaming everybody for buying large coffee at Starbucks.
Almost as much as a gallon of gas.
Well, I did that last week, so now we're on Starbucks, and now I'm going to go after something else next week.
There you go, stick with the gas as long as it's a thing.
I know, it's awful. You can get a lot of cool stuff like shoutouts, raffle entries, ad-free episodes, early episodes of the show, and more. You help us improve the show, meet our personal goals, and keep the lights on. As always, thank you to Jacob Byers for your contribution to our Patreon page. And with all that out of the way, let's finally get into it. So, Lainy, as I told you, because healing is kind of DPS adjacent, because they kind of work similar, I didn't really change much of the structure for healing. So, I'm gonna kick a lot of this to you because, you and Cart, because you guys are more the healers, and I'm more of, I've known about DPS. I did it for the beginning, and then I went to tanking. So, why don't you go ahead and explain what healing is?
Healing is when you help people get their health back.
Very, very astute description.
I mean, but that's exactly what it is, though. You're helping people recover their lost health, as well as provide buffs or any resource sustained with orbs or something. You all can also provide debuffs on, other players or NPCs or bosses.
Between the two, tanking and healing, which would you say provides the most support out of the two?
I would
outside of their primary, so healing, your primary objective is to heal your allies, keep them alive, and tanking is obviously to survive and keep taunt on the boss so it's not beating up the rest of your teammates.
I don't think honestly, I think you kind of need both, so I don't really want to distinguish between them. Now, if you are trying to speedrun a normal dungeon or something with DPS, You can go without a tank if you just have really good DPS and a healer. That 100% done. But I think they're both equally important in the fact that the tank keeps the aggro off of the DPS, who normally tend to stand in stupid, as we discussed last week.
Yes, they do.
My own experience as a PvE healer, especially, has been all the times where I'm wasting all of my resources to heal a DPS who's standing stupid. And most of the time, I stop and go heal the other DPS in the tank because as a healer, your first priority in PvE, for the most part, your first priority is going to be the tank over the DPS. Because if the tank dies, you die, and then the DPS die. DPS are a little more expendable than a tank is.
Yeah, because healers can be, depending on what you're doing. We talked about the differences between PvP. Usually, all roles are kind of, a little bit more meatier because of what you're dealing with. And PvE, healers are a little weaker because they're wearing light armor and they're focused. I mean, I believe you can have a heavy armor healer in dungeons, can't you?
You can, if you are going PvE, a lot of people don't like having healers that are 30k health, and PvP healers are all running minimum 30k health.
With good reason, because again, you're dealing with a lot of players that are, especially as the healer, they're going to focus on you because you're the annoyance. You're the little mosquito that just keeps, just, you
Mm-hmm.
won't, they can't kill your teammates because you keep them alive. So they have to deal with you first if they want to mow everyone else down more effectively.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's really just been my experience. I don't. You've done a lot of. I know you've done tanky. I don't know if you've done a lot of PvE healing.
Yeah, yeah. PvE healing, generally to your previous question, you're going to be in light armor. I mean, you would probably go 5-1-1 for the Undaunted passive still, but definitely 5 light based on the sets that you would most likely be using in that scenario.
Right, right. And
Even starting out with like crafted gear or zone drops,
Mm-hmm. And like we said last week, you can have the best sets in the game for your role, and it won't mean anything if you're not performing that role and doing your rotation. Because if you're a healer, you've got to, like, I think this really applies to PvE and PvP. You've got to have your buffs rolling at all times. You got to have your buffs rolling. You've got to have your heals rolling. Obviously, in PvP and PvE, you're gonna have your burst heal, which if you're doing if you're doing your hots, then you're doing your buffs. You shouldn't need to use the burst heal until you need to burst heal, which is a mistake you see a lot of the time.
yeah,
You
you don't
know,
want to burn out your magicka too early.
right, exactly.
You lay down your hots and your orb or your shards or whatever you have, and then you just wait to see what you can do. You can usually have a few DPS abilities on your PVE healer. I like to use like a wall of elements, and then from there it depends on which class you're running it on. But
Hmm.
yeah,
It really does. Templar is a very bursty class from what I've heard. I've not played a Templar healer. I kind of skipped over it because it was billed to me as the simple healer.
in a way, I
In a
mean,
way, like
from launch,
it has
yes.
its own utility. Um, but it is like take Necro and Warden. They're classes that are very heal over time. They do have a little more of a skill for the play.
Yeah, healer. I mean, Templar as a healer, especially in the early parts of the game before, while there were just 4 classes, they were usually like the go-to healer because they actually had a skill line dedicated to that. Yeah, so that actually uh, was probably the basis of that. Because I mean, back when uh, Breath of Life healed yourself and 2 other people, you could keep a whole 4-person dungeon going with just Breath of Life. So I mean, it's been nerfed several times over the years.
I would say I've heard a lot that this role is the most important, but it's also the most underappreciated. The whole
Oh
motto of
yes.
blame the healer for everything.
Yeah.
I stood in the fire. Why couldn't you keep me alive? Because that's not normal fire. That is an insta kill mechanic that you're not supposed to be in. That cannot be healed through. Like, even god tier healers cannot heal you through that, because that's not what it's meant for. I will say, we're going to talk about this when we finally get into dungeons, but there are builds that, just because it can be overcome, it can be accomplished, doesn't mean it was meant to. Like, dungeons are built a certain way. You're supposed to follow mechanics, not, like, go against the grain. That's most often when you get people killed, specifically yourself, and then your healer, and then the tank looks behind and goes, "What happened?" It's been, as a tank, it's been done many times where I'm doing just fine, and I look behind me and everyone's dead because people aren't doing the proper mechanics, and they're not, like, relying on the healer and doing what the healer needs them to do. I'm trying to think, because you guys have talked about a couple different things that we need to deep dive on, because we could talk all day long about, like, gear when it comes to DPS builds, but healing and tanking, there's a very specific list of sets and gear that you should be going after, specifically monster sets. I know we're getting a little more advanced, but just kind of, if you guys want to just kind of give a general overview of maybe some sets people should be looking for as they level up and, get into max rank and get into those dungeons.
I mean, like we were saying, like you could have like the end game, like perfected trial gear, and it really depends on your role. I know as a healer, especially in PvE and PvP, which I think PvP tends to stick with one kind of setup from my experience. Obviously, it changes as the meta changes, but I know as a PvE healer, you've got to have like a wide range of sets at your disposal because healing is so situational. It is in PvP too, but it is a lot. If you're in an organized comp group running 4 healers, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think it largely depends on the situation that you're playing in. Like,
Oh,
I
100%.
mean, 4-person dungeon. Okay, there's probably certain sets you'll use there. Spell Power Cure would be great in that situation, for instance. Versus, are you, when you're in Cyrodiil, are you in like a small man group? Are you running solo? Or are you in a more organized group with a specific composition that you have to play a particular role in? And also depends on class too. I mean, that's a big difference also from one class to another,
Oh yeah,
just based on the different buffs.
if you take our comp group for example, I don't think any of the 4 healers was running the same thing.
Well, when we're playing, like the comp group we're in plays in Raven Watch right now, and when you're in no proc, I mean that's very different from being in a CP proc campaign as far as what the healers are going to wear.
Very different.
No
It really
proc.
depended on class too, because I'm not sure what you were running as a Sorc, but I know Ren was running something different on his Templar. I was running something different on a Necro. I think Venus ran a similar setup to mine on his Warden though.
Yeah, a lot of it's just raw healing output and survivability in Raven Watch, whereas if you go into Grey Host or Black Reach, you're going to be given your teammates buffs that you know will be increasing their damage, increasing their survivability, things like that.
Like whichever you're doing PvE or PvP, your role as a healer is not only to heal, it is to provide the buffs, and there are some healers running debuffs. I know some healers like to run a Destro Staff on back bar so they can have the Destro Staff skill that provides breach. What I love about my Necro is I don't have to do that because I can just run Boneyard.
Yeah.
That's true.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but most, if not all, effective healers are Magicka builds. Stam healers don't necessarily exist, right?
Yeah, healers doing this when you have to run against a group that's running 12 a day.
I've actually played a stamina warden healer in a composition group. It is very it's a workout for your fingers. Let me tell
I
you.
was gonna say it. If there is, I'm assuming it's a more advanced play style.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
It's
like
a
a lot
higher
higher skill
action per
core.
minute build for sure.
Okay,
Hmm.
so newer players out there, just kind of learn the game a little bit before you being a little too adventurous on your healing builds there.
I
Uh,
mean, we've all talked about races, Marcus, and we've mentioned that unless you really want to min-max, race doesn't really matter. But if you're new to healing, I would highly suggest running a Breton.
not an
Bretons just
Argonian.
have
Yeah.
great
Bretons are and Argonians probably the top two.
Bretons and Argonians. Argonians are really good, right? I would say Breton for a new player simply because of the mag regen and mag sustain that the Breton, and magic abilities cost less on a Breton, which is why I would say it above an Argonian. Simply because it's going to be easier to deal with resource sustain. The, like obviously the Argonians pop a pot, but if you're a new player, you may not, it takes a little bit to get used to popping potions left and right. I use potions like water. I go through so many a night.
Yeah, you figure again, I've been playing this game for years, and I'm just now starting to use potions and trying to make that part of my build. Largely more about, you know, resource sustain than anything else, because, as a tank, I don't need the buffs or debuffs, or not that you debuff yourself, but you get what I'm saying. You don't necessarily need um, most of the potions, I think, as a tank, but sustain is very important. So
Hmm.
what kind of potions do you generally types of potions do you generally use for healing?
It's immovability all the way.
Okay.
Movability.
You just max health, max magicka if you're a magicka build, and then
Mhm.
immovability. Yeah,
I
that's
also
almost
use the
universal.
free tripe. Like the free tripods you get from, rewards are good. Yeah, and movabilities all the way. I think I use them on like both my PvE and my PvE healers. And they're just
PVE, you could probably use spell power pots or the
yeah.
alliance spell pots, which are equivalent,
Hmm. Yeah, they're
depending on
both
how
good.
you build. I mean, some
Right.
classes, like Warden, you could probably run Netch as
Hmm.
a healer, and then that'll give you your major sorcery and your a little bit more sustain.
Yeah.
You may not need spell power because you also have a skill like Lotus Blossom that gives you major prophecy. So then you just need a potion that give you magicka when you need it at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured that when we eventually do an advanced combat episode, we can talk about, the Mundus stones and the potions and all that. And uh, it'll be separate from builds, because when we do builds, we can actually talk about actual builds that people use, meta, non-meta stuff like that. But I was just kind of curious, since we brought it up about what potions you guys were using.
Hmm.
I
Um,
mean, and if you think about it, an Argonian healer can use any pot.
yeah, because
Like
of its passive.
Argonians are going to go through trash pots.
Any pot's a tripod for an Argonian.
Hmm. Exactly.
um, I we talked about it a little bit, but I should bring up the question: is there a big difference between PVE and PvP healing?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
I mean, people are trying to kill you.
Right.
But I mean, PvP healing, like PvE healing, you gotta know mechs. You gotta know what to do during those mechs and how to help your group. PvP is a whole nother ball game because you may not, you can guess what your opponents are gonna try to do, but you can't always be for sure. Sometimes they do things that you're like, oh, they're doing that. But I would say they're a completely different ball game. You've just gotta be so what's the one we're looking for? You've gotta, be able to adjust very quickly.
Yeah, it's a little more reactive than proactive in some cases,
Hmm.
where you have to situationally react to what's going on in an appropriate manner very quickly, which is a bit of a challenge. But I mean, it depends on again like what you're actually doing in either PvE or PvP, like whether you're in a vet dungeon, your normal dungeon, trial group, versus PvP and battlegrounds versus Cyrodiil.
Hmm.
I think the main thing is positioning in both cases. PvE, you just have to know where you're standing, that you're not going to get nuked by a mechanic, and be able to help those around you. In PvP, a lot of it is just moving with your group, uh, making sure you're in a position where you can heal them, especially if you have like conal abilities that heal only in front of you, while at the same time maneuvering yourself out of danger as best you can.
Oh
What's the
yeah.
specific positioning of a healer in like a dungeon? Because I know for tank there is specific positioning outside of mechanics that you're supposed to do, and the DPS is supposed to be in a certain spot as well. But where is there a specific place the healer's supposed to be?
Really, you need to have everyone in front of you because you're using combat prayer to provide the minor berserk
Hmm.
buff.
I think
That
what
only goes
annoyed
out in front
me,
of you in a cone.
yeah, I think what annoyed me the most about healing PvE was all of the newer ranged DPS who thought they needed to stay as far away from the boss as possible. But then,
Or when
they
they're
would get
just running around like mad because they're actually PvPers.
right. Yeah, I'm definitely been guilty of that before. My experience in PvP has made me quite the kiter, but I make a really good kite healer in trials. So that's what I do is I just run around. It's not bad to be mobile, and obviously it's less that you're standing in fire.
Yeah, and some mechanics call for that mobility, so you just have to
Mhm.
adapt as you go.
Right. But you always want to stay in healing range of the healer in front of the healer. And I've seen so many ranged DPS staying so far away from the healer. And then they're like, why'd you let me die? I'm like, I asked you to stand in range of my heals. I can't get you if you're way behind me.
Right, right. We were talking about gear a little bit there, and I think we actually forgot to point out that the primary weapon for a healer is the resto stave, and then the
Mhm.
optional back bar weapon is, like you said, the destro stave if they want to add a
Um,
little bit of DPS and debuff.
um,
Mhm.
you can run a sword and board, you can run dual wield, you can run a destro staff, you can run a lot of things with back bar as a healer, especially in PvP. Like I know we ran dual wield, we've run I think a lot more Destro is seen in PvE than PvP. Like dual wield seemed to have been pretty popular, and sword and board as well.
Yeah. Dual wield in particular for PvP because that's, depending on what armor you're wearing, that's where you might get your major evasion buff.
Hmm.
Uh,
And sword and board, I would say I would go quick cloak for my comp group healers, and then for my small man healers, I was always going sword and board. So
uh,
it's so situational what you're gonna use.
how does healing itself work? Because we talked about how DPS works, and if I remember correctly, it's basically a DPS that doesn't do damage. Like in terms of you using spell and weapon damage to up your healing ability, along with other passive stuff.
Yeah, true. That's a good assessment.
True, unless you are going for a full crit build, which what you would do on a for a Nightblade, for example.
Right, right, and that's what I was saying too. Is I'm assuming similar to DPS, there are different styles of healing you could do. You could just go off weapon spell damage. You can do a crit heal build. Um, although actually I guess that's pretty much the limitation on what you can do, because we covered the other thing for DPS. I think we mentioned it which was penetration. Although, does penetration matter in healing at all?
No, it does not.
No,
I didn't
no,
think so.
not at all.
Which is kind of nice because you can ignore that stat entirely. Whereas DPS in PvP, you have to consider max stats, you have to consider your weapon or spell damage, you have to consider your crit, and you have to consider your penetration. So it's
I
a little
mean,
more
even if
complex.
you run a crit damage build, you're still needing to build into penetration. Because since everyone builds most everyone builds tankier in PvP, you need the penetration allows you to get under the armor in order to do damage. If, I've seen builds that are running 100% crit and almost no penetration. They're not going to be able to do their max amount of damage because they're losing a lot with the resist.
Right. And of course, just like DPS, you want to include rotation and weaving into that, correct?
Oh,
Or,
yes.
or is
Yeah.
it okay? I was gonna say, or is it more
As well
situational
as
like a
throw in
tank?
heavy attacks because you get, believe it's major mending from a fully charged resto heavy attack.
That's correct.
Ooh, nice.
So if you're a healer running ritual, which you already boost your healing, or healer's habit gives you minor mending, you really need to be doing those resto heavy attacks to get the full amount of healing.
Right. And we're talking about what was it? Races. We were talking about the best races, even though, like you said, there is not necessarily, best, worst, whatever. What about classes? What would be the easiest class for somebody to learn on as a healer? I'm guessing Templar.
A Templar or Warden, probably, yeah. Both of them have a dedicated skill line to healing, essentially.
I would say Warden's a good one. I would say Templar over Warden, simply because Warden has a lot more buff rotation than a Templar does. It's got more heal over time that you got to keep up. Not as much as Necro, because Necro has skills that you've got to hit every 6 seconds.
Right. But obviously, just like the tank we were talking about, how the Necro has that incredibly great bonus of having a resurrection ability.
Yes. Now, if we're talking a new player, I would say Templar, because they may not have Necro or Warden unlocked. Necro and Nightblade. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cart, but I believe them to be classes that have a higher skill floor when it comes to healing.
Well, Necro, for sure. Probably Nightblade, too. Nightblade's not that bad, because largely you'll be using restoration staff abilities, too. But you can use Healthy Offering, which gives you the minor mending buff, and it's a solid single target heal.
Healthy Offering is an amazing heal.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but it's probably a little bit more complex than Templar or Warden, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, Nightblade in general is a more difficult class to master, which is why I bring that up. Other than some of the base classes.
All right. I'm trying to think of where we go from here with the healer. Because basically, like I said, a healer is basically just a DPS skinned differently.
Is it?
I mean, because you go off spell and weapon damage for your healing, and you can do, crit builds and stuff like that. They also rely on heavy and light attacking. I mean, I guess so does tanking too. I'm just
There's actually a third thing that helps healers that DPS do not get. There is a bonus you can get to percent healing, like healing done. And you see this on certain gear sets where you get 4% healing done for wearing this one piece of monster set or something like that. And that's another way you can boost your heals through your itemization. Yeah.
Even if you're running in a no proc campaign in Zero, you can really stack the buff by running 2 different pieces of 2 different healing monster sets that give 4% healing. Like Troll King, Cynthia Blades, Sentinel, etc.
An Earth Core, yeah.
Yeah, Earth Core is good.
Would you guys recommend somebody um, try out DPS before they tried healing, or do you think people could just go right into healing?
Honestly, play how they want. If they want to start off with healing, it's kind of like, if you start off with DPS and try to go for a more difficult class, it can be done. It will just take longer. But the ESO's been great about, any class can do anything, and they have different classes that may be a little easier for tanking its DK, for damage its Sword, or Templar. And for healing, I'd say it's Templar too.
One of the nice things that I would mention for Templar, especially for people starting out, you have a passive for Templar that decreases the time it takes to res a person. If someone
And I believe they
dies,
get full health when they res.
and then bring them back at full health.
Yeah.
So one thing you do starting out is if you can craft or have a friend craft Kragrenak's Hope for you, that's a nice base set to start out healing with as a crafted set. And then try to farm a zone set like maybe Mother's Sorrow to increase your crit.
Or even another craftable like Seducer or Eyes of Mara.
Yeah, Seducer would be great. Eyes, yeah, if you definitely. Although Templar healing is not quite as reliant on the rest of staff, so.
Yeah, that's true. But definitely Seducers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean those are two good crafted sets starting out. Like Hagranex will. It not only has 2 5-set bonuses. One is like 222 spell damage, which is about equivalent to Juliana's, which is 300. That's another good crafted set. And it also reduces the time it takes to resurrect someone. From what I remember, if you have the Cyrodiil support passive for reduced resurrection time, you have the Templar passive for reduced resurrection, you're in Kragrenak's Hope, and you have the CP passive. I think you can res someone in about a second and a half, is what I heard.
Oh, neat. I mean, there's a lot of great sets. There's good CP to help with healing. And, like we said, like you can work your way up to those bigger sets.
Yeah, when I started healing, I was wearing Kragrenak's, and I forget what the second one was, but Kragrenak's was like the base set.
I'm trying to think if I have any more questions about healing, because again, I've done tanking, I've done DPS, but healing is just something I literally have like no experience with, which again is why I handed the show off to you guys for the most part.
I mean, what I've seen is your story of how you got into tanking seems to be true of a lot of healers and tanks. They got told that they weren't good enough at DPS. Instead of being given the tools to help them, people were just like, oh, do this instead. And that's why a lot of support fields get made, because people think they're not good enough at one role, so they go try something else. And maybe they could have. I think anyone can be good at a role. They just have to. Sometimes there's a little more work involved to learn one role over the other.
Yeah, I got into healing actually because I wanted to farm items for PvP, and I understood already that I was not great at DPS, and if I was going to get into a random dungeon group, it was going to be much easier as a tank or healer. So,
I think that's another reason people do it too, is because like, and I've had it told to me before, like, oh well, I'm just going to be a tank or a healer. In fact, someone in our Discord said they're working on a necro tank because they're like, well, I can never queue for dungeons because I can never get a tank or a healer, so I'm just gonna go with a tank role so I can hopefully get into more dungeons that way.
Oh, it's like an instant queue. Yeah.
Yeah, except for Quintus apparently.
Oh, he's cursed though.
He is cursed. He told us that same reason, and then he sat in queue for like 30 minutes, and I bet it was because the queue was broken. And I was queuing on my healer just fine last week, into a certain dungeon I needed just fine, and then I grouped up with Quintus, and the queue broke.
Yeah, it was the three of us. It was like tank heal and DPS. All we need is a fourth DPS, but which you think? I mean, that's like shooting fish in a barrel, getting a DPS. But no, No,
Yeah.
not for Quintus.
Quintus broke it. No matter what role you choose, and I know we'll go over tanking next week, just remember that it takes practice to, really get good. And I don't say that lightly because, whatever you, one role may seem easier over the other, but, I know from being a healer, um, like it can be a little daunting to always have your skills up and you're providing buffs to the group. The healer is such an important role, so is the tank. So is DPS. Now, like I said jokingly, the DPS are a little more expendable because if a DPS dies, it won't instantly wipe the group. If the healer dies, that's not good. If the tank dies, the healer dies, and then DPS die.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm trying to think. I had another question, and now it's eluding me. Shoot. Oh well, you can finish your thought.
Well, I was done.
Okay. Well, like I said, healing is like so foreign to me. I know one day I will, try to get into it. Oh, actually, I do remember what I was going to, because we kind of talked about what you kind of want your average stat pools to be. Is healing similar to DPS in that regard?
Depends. I mean, in PvP, I think recovery is going to be a little bit more important than a max stat pool. In fact, in my Ravenwatch build for our organized group, I only run like 23k Magicka, which would be super low in like a PvE situation. But that's because I need both Stam and Mag Sustain in that build. But I also, it's a crit healing build, so I have like 50% crit chance. I have plus like 22% healing from different buffs active just on my character. And yeah, it actually adds up pretty well from there.
Excellent. Well, man, I think this is gonna be our first like short episode. Can you guys think of any other important information, especially for newer players that they need to know when diving into healing?
I mean, don't, like any other class, don't be afraid to die in PvP, for sure. I mean, everyone dies in PvP a lot. So, I mean, don't take it personally. Just learn from your mistakes and keep moving on.
Yeah.
PvE, I think, is a little bit easier for sure. So, if you want to get into healing in PvP, I would first, sort through healing in PvE, where it's not like live ammo being fired at you, although there is in a way, I guess. But, I mean, it's not as, I feel like it's not as tense in PvE. I mean, the tank's going to tank, hopefully. The DPS are going to be DPS. And you just got to keep things moving. You provide your buffs, get your heals going, and that's that. So.
Oh, and there's, again, similar to DPS, there is AoE and single target, correct? And dots. Well, not damage over time, but
Pots.
Pots. Yeah, I was gonna say pots.
Yeah, so typically you build yourself with you have your burst heal, which is going to be usually an AoE heal. Single, hit multiple targets for a decent amount. And that's, combat prayer usually serves that purpose well as a kind of a restless staff ability that everyone can use. Plus, it gives the minor berserk passive, our buff that your teammates need.
Mm-hmm.
But then, depending on your class skills, you have a variety of hots that you can put down. The Templar would put down Extended Ritual, for instance, for everyone standing, and it gets a nice healing over time. Radiating Regeneration from the Resto line hits 3 targets, and that's a hot on each of them. Grand Healing, whichever morph you use from the Resto line, same thing. It's a AoE heal over time. You just put it on the ground, and hopefully you can get a couple of your
Gonna be
guys
one of
in
your
there.
biggest heals too. That big AoE heal from the Resto staff line is a huge heal. I've seen it outperform some really nice class heals that are AoEs too. So a lot of like, for example, Warden's AoE heal, the flowers. It's really nice and it provides that buff, but it doesn't do as much healing as the ground heal from Resto.
The difference with the Warden one, Budding Seeds, is that it actually has a burst heal after the hot,
Yeah,
which is um,
it's situational though.
yeah, yeah.
As
But
all
it's a nice, and it has a synergy heal too, which is
Mhm.
nice. But if you're using like a master resto staff, then you want to use the
Mhm.
grant healing to get that buff and give your allies resources and get resources back yourself if you're using like healing springs.
Oh yeah.
Um, no, going back to talking about weapons just real quick, because we were talking about how in back bar, you can be creative and do anything you want that works for you. But would you say that you can't necessarily be an effective healer without a resto at all?
I mean,
You could, but it'd have to be a class like Warden or Templar
right.
that had some really good heals built in already.
Right, and I would say still always have a resto front bar because if you're not running a resto as a healer, you are missing out on some tremendous passives. You're missing out on major mending from your heavy attacks. I would say just the passives and the major mending are reason enough to run a resto.
Yeah, I would almost 100% you need a resto staff as a healer. Yeah.
hmm
What are
Your
the
back bar can vary between resto staff, depending on what you need it for. Destro, Stormborn, dual wield, you know, like, but I would say front bar always resto, powered resto.
what are the target numbers you want to? Because I mean, we've talked about the numbers on DPS on how just they go higher and higher and higher. And I'm assuming obviously you want to heal as much as you can. But what's kind of the target average number you're wanting to look at for healing? Your par, I guess, for healing.
I mean, I would say your CPM, your cast per minute, is going to be a lot more important than focusing on raw numbers.
It's going to be more on buff up times
hmm
than actual. I mean, when you get to end game, like either PvP or PvE, um, the actual healing is important, but not as important as maintaining the buffs that you're required to maintain in an
Agreed.
organized group.
Would you say buffs or debuffs are more important for a healer? I mean, I know we can mix and match, but if you had to choose one or the other, would paired with a tank, what would you say to that?
Probably buffs.
Okay,
Personal buffs and group buffs, especially.
because I'm thinking tanks buff, of course, especially with like protection, all that stuff. But I do see a lot of like debuff stuff, mainly knocking down resistances, that kind of thing. Because I mean, you're right in front of the boss. You're right in front of it, so you might as well like make sure that it's as weak as possible for the DPS to be taking it down.
Yeah, I think kind of what happens is the tank is debuffing the target while the healer is buffing the DPS to do more damage to the target. That might be a good way of putting it. Because you give them minor berserk, you give them um, resources when they need it, so they don't have to try to heavy attack and regain resources. They can just synergize an orb and move on with their lives.
Right. I believe like orbs have like a 20-second cooldown before you can do the synergy.
Yeah. So you have your spear shards too if you're a Templar, which is what makes it again a nice healing class.
Is that per for orbs? Is that per pull? How do I word this? So if a tank has orbs, that's another source of synergy, or is it just in general the synergy needs no matter
The
where it comes
synergy.
from?
It doesn't matter who's casting it. You can only do one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tank running orbs is kind of useless if most often the healer's gonna run orbs.
Well, you'll see some DPS running like the damage orb. Actually, the healer probably would run damage orb too, especially if melee DPS, range DPS. I don't know. Either way, because there's two morphs to the orb: necrotic orb, which is energy orb, which does AOE heal when you synergize it, and mystic orb, which does AOE damage when you synergize it. And at the same time, both return resources in a similar ratio.
Mm-hmm. And there are sets as well that you can get from Dungeons and Trials that do also return resources. One in particular is called Stone Talker. It's from the Rockgrove Trial, and it takes a heavy attack to proc it. But
yeah, monster set I like to use in PvE dungeons is Symphony of Blades, which provides a buff whenever it procs on any of your party members.
I think the 3 monster sets are Symphony of Blades, Chokethorn, and Earthgore.
Yeah, Earthgore is more of a PvP one because
really?
it can also clear a negative effect on the ground.
Oh, interesting.
That's where you see it primarily used, but I think it's still a solid AoE heal, but it's not so much about healing, raw healing in PvE. It's more about keeping your guys topped off, keeping them buffed up with whatever set procs you're running and,
right.
and abilities.
Something I believe we talked about in the DPS episode, and I apologize if we didn't, but every DPS build should be running a self-heal in case the healer goes down and you need to keep your life up and survive long enough for somebody to pick the healer up, or you pick the healer up, or whatever. So healer buffing those stats also helps DPS self-heal and survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been in dungeons where I just didn't have to do anything hardly for the DPS other than just maintain uptimes on HOTS and buffs. Just depends on the group you're with and their abilities too. So
excellent. Well, I think we've squeezed all the information we can. We added I think a good solid 5-7 minutes to the conversation. Yeah, I know there's a lot to healing, and right now obviously we're just focusing on getting people out there to get all the baby healers out there prepped and ready to go, and then everybody kind of learns as they go. But yeah, I think the intimidation for me for healing ironically is one that I didn't have going into tanking, and that's just the unholy criticism that you'll take if you make even one mistake. So I would say in that aspect, if you want to learn healing, go in somewhere with friends.
definitely helps to have friends because just not as nervous with people you're familiar with.
Yeah, and run obviously lower, Fungal Grotto. Take a couple of friends. I mean, honestly, you could even run something like Fungal Grotto, even Fungal Grotto Vet, with randos and be just fine. So that's a good way to if you don't have any friends, that would be a good way to go in and self-teach yourself healing, or I should say train, because obviously you can't train on a dummy, can you?
No.
Not really.
Okay,
no.
Okay, that's what I thought. But knowing me,
not really good training tool there. Yeah.
Knowing me, I say that, and you guys are like, oh no, you train just fine on a dummy. I'm like,
no, you can't. But I remember back in Star Wars: The Old Republic, there was a healing mode, a healing training mode on those dummies.
Well, now we figure out what we need to ask Zos for next. We need healing dummies.
No, you know what Zos is gonna do? It's gonna nerf healing if we do that.
Oh, what? You can't figure out a...
We can't ask Zos.
You need a dummy? What's wrong with you?
No, you know what the most important change of the upcoming patch notes is?
What?
The guards in Bruma. Fixing that is ruining my immersion, actually.
What? Wait, what? What's wrong?
So there's been 2 guards in Bruma by the quartermaster who have had. There's a glitch where they're buried in the snow up to their necks. And they're fixing it with the next patch, and all of us are just like, that ruins our immersion.
It ruins the immersion. What?
The
Talking
stealth
heads?
guards. The stealth guards, man.
Oh my god, that's so great.
But,
Well,
that's kind of the patch notes, though. There's, like, important stuff that gets fixed, and then there's this random stuff, like the guards and Bruma that are getting fixed.
every
And,
patch,
half of the game probably doesn't even realize those kind of glitches exist.
I know it's like, but patch notes, they always have those weird random things. Like
Exactly.
every single patch notes has this one thing. Well, this person wasn't talking right, now we fixed it. Okay, didn't really notice that before, but cool.
Right.
But here's the thing. It's cool that they do that because there is going to be, or there are people that do notice. So I do like
Fair,
that.
but I was actually pretty entertained by them. I would say, I don't want to harsh on Zos too much because this is my favorite game. Love the game. Love what they've done for the game. But I feel like there's more important things to fix than 2 guards that are buried up to their necks in snow.
But here's the thing. That's why they give it to the interns. Here, you're not getting paid, but help us fix these little things that only a handful of people care about.
I don't even think anyone cared about it.
Well,
It was just like, oh, that's fine. That's there.
Now I do. Let it be known to anyone who listens, I now care about these headed in under, I don't know what to call them, in-ground guards. But you're right. I've done a lot of floating around in Bruma, like with events and stuff, because like that's what I should have done, is because I haven't really done a lot of the Zenithar. I've been just a lot busy with a lot of other stuff. And
Doesn't the event end today?
Yeah, I think it does.
I think it was yesterday because
No, it's the 12th.
I was moving to a way shrine and it cost a lot more than usual.
Oh, then maybe it did end
Maybe it did.
today.
I didn't really care about the last day of it because I got a lot of rewards and I didn't really want to spend more tickets on the stuff I didn't really care about.
I will say I'm excited for what they have announced for the next event ticket item, and that is the Hourglass of Akatosh. And we can actually change whether it's day or night or twilight or whatever in our houses.
It's going to be interesting in
I'm really
Grand
excited.
Civic Villa.
I mean, you know what the funny thing is?
What?
You have Essential Housing Tools, which is a PC add-on. You don't need it.
Well, this comes in a nice fancy Hourglass.
Well, you have to spend event tickets on it, though.
You know what? I don't really spend event tickets on
Can we
much
really?
else.
Can we really fit it into our houses? We need. You know what we need to. You know what I would pay real money for? More furnishing slots.
Actually,
It's not enough.
we're pretty much at the end of the show, so we're just having a nice little like rambling at this point. But you know how I talked about how Homestead 2.0 needs to be a thing, but I don't know what that would involve. I just figured it out. Upping all the storage and all that other stuff for houses. Like, I know if you have ESO Plus, it doubles, but even still with some of the big houses, it's not enough.
So the notable house size has a wide range of smaller houses to very, very large houses, and 700 slots, even if you are an ESO subscriber, is simply not enough.
Especially when they keep coming out with more antiquity. And it's not the general item stuff. I still have trouble capping that. It's all the special stuff. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Who do you talk to? Because everyone I've ever talked to, and myself, I'm at 696 slots on my house.
I mean,
of the regular slots. I would like more special furnishing slots, because those Orbs of Meridia from the Undaunted Quartermaster, you can only have 10 total, and I need more.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like, when you have the general items that go up to like 600 or however much it is, I think it's 600 for Forge Master Falls, but when you get like all the other ones, the special stuff where you can only have so many, like guests and pets and all this other stuff, and I get maybe it's because of animation limitation, I don't know, but I think we definitely need a Homestead 2.0 just for that reason alone. So, and so ends our healing episode. / partial housing episode. Did you guys have any more final thoughts on healing?
I wanted to mention this random thing. When I first started healing, started learning the resto stuff, I didn't understand how it worked. I said, why would I? I thought when I first picked up Arresta staff, if I pointed at someone, I'll heal them, right? No. No, you can actually damage people with the healing staff, which sounded ridiculous to me. This is 2014, but yeah.
I think
Yeah,
my favorite
now there's
thing-
actually a skill that lets you do that, but it's so difficult to manage.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about healing is in PvP, and if you're running an organized group, oftentimes the damage dealers are going to get all the killing blows. But a couple times a night, a healer gets a light attack or a heavy attack resto staff that finishes off someone. It's very satisfying.
That's true. Or a enchant proc that kills someone.
Yeah, or the escapist poison.
Oh, I did forget to mention at the top of the show that I did recently finally finish High Isle, so I have my Hunding deck. It's all there. All I needed was the last piece, completing the quest. And oh my god, if you haven't, if any of you out there have not completed the High Isle main quest line, do it. Go out there. Like, the final battle was the greatest and most moving battle I have felt in ESO. Mostly because of who is involved and seeing them all work together. I'm not going to obviously spoil anything, but just, I mean, if you're even like a quarter of the way through, you kind of probably already know what I'm talking about. You kind of already foresaw it happening, but that's all I'm going to leave it. I'm really excited to finish out the rest of the areas in High Isle and move on to Lost Depths, because they just released those dungeons. Well, not released them, but showed us the stream for them. And Bioshock meets Elder Scrolls? This needs to be an actual game. That is so cool. Underwater Dwemer stuff. I love it. So, that's it for this episode of Legends Rise. Thank you all so much for joining us. And remember, if you want more stuff, you can check out our Discord. Once again, the links to those are on our Facebook and Twitter at Legends Rise ESO. Come be a part of the fun and make some new friends. And if you want more of that out of your experience, you can go to patreon.com/Legends Rise ESO and become a Legends Plus member. Music is Sons of Skyrim, epic metal remix edited by me and performed by Brandon Strader. And you can find him on YouTube and Facebook at BESTRADER. That's Best Raider. Lainy, where can the fine folks find you at?
Well, as always, I am on ESO, on PCNA, at Adexia the One-Eyed.
Cart, do you have anything you want to plug?
No. I mean, I have YouTube, but I post like guild videos there and
Those
occasionally
videos are great.
guides.
Oh,
What's
plug
that?
Those videos are great.
Plug it.
I think it's youtube.com/Kartlin ESO. That's all it is.
Excellent. I'll have to remember to get that from you and put it in the description for YouTube and for the show, so that way everybody can just go to our description and click on that. So,
Sure.
And you can find me on Xbox at Everyone's Problem, spelled with a 0 and no E at the end. Come hang out with me on the North American server, or if you aren't up for ESO, come join us on Halo, COD, Minecraft, and a bunch of other stuff. Currently, we are, we're sailing the high seas on Sea of Thieves. And I've been doing that voice to everyone, and everyone's about ready to murder me. Who wants to play with my sperm whale? A precursor to what tonight's stream is going to be about. Oh no, and it's going to be a little bit of a late stream, but that's okay. Yeah, don't forget to hit me up or hit us up at Legends Rise ESO on Twitch. Again, I'm trying to be consistent, but it's not really as possible for me. But if you go ahead and follow it, and you happen to see me start up a stream, go check it out. It's really entertaining. At least I think so. My mommy said I'm special, or, she did before she was put into a box on the mantle. Anyway. Dark jokes, dark jokes. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you in Tamriel.